To moderate this session, I'll be introducing someone who has had a tremendous impact in the digital Islamic space and recently has co-founded Affinis Labs, a US-based incubator to support development of digital Islamic services. So with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Shahid Aminullah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Just want to make sure this is working. Okay, good. So something amazing has been happening over the last 10 to 20 years that these three professionals up here have a really good handle on. And I want to take you back about 15 or 20 years. I started Zabiya.com, which is a halal restaurant guide, about 17 years ago, back in Silicon Valley when, in the 90s when things were just starting. And at the time, the market that I defined for myself was a specifically American Muslim market. I wasn't thinking big and global. The reason I didn't is because the way I saw it at the time is that we didn't have a global Muslim economy. We had multiple Muslim economies that were based in demographics that had their own unique characteristics. But what happened is that the internet started doing something very interesting. It started enabling connections between people at an extremely rapid rate. And as people grew up under the internet and started to develop a culture that was shaped by the internet and more importantly shaped by connections with other Muslims that they were meeting from around the world and realizing that they didn't live in their own little bubble anymore. They lived in a global community that was a very diverse and plural community, but they had shared values. And those shared values over time started to create a shared culture. And finally, when the advent of social media came, where the transfer of information between individuals within this global ummah accelerated tremendously and became multinodal and became almost pervasive, you then started to get this coalescing of this market, right? The world's largest ummah is the ummah that is online. It is the group of people whose cultures, whose lifestyles have been shaped by their online experiences, who feel a sense of affinity with people they've never met around the world. They share the same jokes, they share the same music, they share the same cultural identities. They influence each other greatly. And we've crossed that threshold now where we can now market to this global, as our friends at Alchemia call it, the global urban Muslim. And what that's done is every time you have a deep cultural shift like that, you enable a whole new series of goods and services and economies. And that presents both challenges and opportunities. The challenge is that this group of people is coalescing around an identity that is still in its infancy. It hasn't reached this solid, concrete form yet. But the opportunity that we have is that we have the opportunity to help shape that market. There's a famous saying by Henry Ford that if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And the idea behind that is that sometimes you have to look at this demographic and ask not what they want now, but what do they need 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And what goods and services and information that can I give them that's going to help them get there? So the group of people that we have here on this stage are in that driver's seat. They're people that have that very heady responsibility, not just of catering to this new global population, but also the responsibility of helping shape who they are going to be, and by extension, who their children are going to be, who their grandchildren are going to be. This is a market that is unique among all markets in the world. It's not based on affinity, it's not based on national origin, it's not based on ethnicity, it's based on a shared set of values. And when you create a market based on those values, you can't abandon those values as you try to cater to that market, right? The easiest thing to do is to cater to them just based on this shallow Muslim identity. But the more sophisticated thing to do is how do you respond to their need to be connected to these values, give them goods and services that accentuate those values, that empower the people in the market to live by those values. This is a very, very deep and profound thing that I think if people outside this market truly understood, that they would be beating a door down to get to this market. But for various reasons, this market has been left to us. So it's a good opportunity for us to shape it based on what we think is the way to go before all the big boys jump in when they see that opportunity. So I'm going to allow our three panelists to briefly introduce who they are, and more importantly, their connection to this world. Each of them has a very unique perspective into this market. Even though it's the same market, they're all approaching it from different ways. And I want you to hear a little bit about how they're doing that. So we'll go ahead and start with Amani.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Amani Al-Khatatba. I am the founding editor-in-chief of MuslimGirl.net. It's an online magazine for millennial Muslim women in Western societies. And currently it is the #1 source for Muslim women's opinions in the United States. And we cover a wide range of topics from current events to fashion to pop culture. And we have a vested stake in the growing industry right now. And I actually want to give you all a better idea of how Muslim Girl started. So I see a lot of people in the audience have their phones out right now. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that you all whip them out. Pull out your phones if you can for a moment, if I can inconvenience you, even though we all look for excuses to pull out our phones, I know. So I want you to open your phone. I'm going to do this along with you guys. And I want you to open up to your web browser. So for me, that's Google Chrome. For many people, it's going to be Safari, whatever it may be. And I want you to go to images.google.com. Right? Internet's biggest source for images online, biggest search engine. Is everyone on Google? All right. Once you're on Google Images, I want you to type in Muslim woman and then hit enter. Now, I don't know about you, but this is what comes up for me. And the picture is pretty bleak, right? Not very flattering. I mean, I don't know, it doesn't really look like many of the women that are in here, right? But they're there, right. So this is a very limited understanding and image of who Muslim women really are. And it's very two-dimensional. And the problem is that this is a direct result of the post-9/11 era that we're all living in right now. For us, we got sick and tired of people choosing what that image is for us and speaking on our behalf and eliminating our voice from the conversation. So we decided to create our own platform to reclaim that narrative. Now, likewise, there are, just like our website is in English, which is a pretty accessible language, there is one language that is even more universal. Does anyone know what that is? Money. Money, right? So when people start talking money, everyone starts listening. And the thing is, just like these images on Google, and just like Muslim Girl, and just like this really growing, booming economy right now, it's being spurred by the post-9/11 generation, the millennials. So we're the ones that we are the demographic that is most online. We're the ones most active on social media. We're the ones carving these new spaces and avenues in the media to create a voice for ourselves. And with the rise of this new technology like social media, we see that we're making way for a lot of new markets. And those new marketplaces need consumers. Now, what is one of the most booming markets that is emerging as almost a direct result of social media? Modest fashion. Shouldn't be that much of a surprise, right? Especially with the number of Muslim women that make up the global population. But especially with a social network like Instagram, where we see a lot of the hijabi fashionistas, the makeup gurus, where they have a really exceptional presence, Now, that in combination with the very globalized market space that we have right now, it's no wonder that a lot of women around the world are starting to pay more attention to modest fashion trends. These Muslim women that are creating these followings for themselves online that could be from the Middle East or from Western countries, but likewise still sport a hijab or modest clothing. And markets, businesses, brands, they're opening their eyes up to all of this potential. What does that mean? Who are the people that they want to start hearing from now more than ever? Muslim women. So just like we're all observing the millennial demographic and how it's changing and shifting for Muslims in the global Islamic economy, it translates so easily into political empowerment as well. That type of empowerment through our pocketbooks and through these companies results in our voices being more elevated, not just in Islamic economies, but also in the global economy as a whole. And we can easily see over the past few years how that's translated into political power. One of the most obvious being the boycott, divest, and sanction movement against Israeli war crimes. And that's a very grassroots initiative, and the Israeli government cited it after Iran as being the biggest threat to Israel, because Muslims and people of conscience around the world are choosing to hit companies where it hurts, in their pockets. It's just one of the very many ways that we can use this growing exceptional potential of the marketplace and of our consumer base in order to empower ourselves, to cultivate a voice for ourselves. And now suddenly, who's accessing muslimgirl.net and who wants to hear our voices the most? It's these big companies. They want to know how they can gain access to this marketplace that's almost untouched by these big businesses right now. It's just a whole lot of opportunity waiting to happen. In that way, who stands to gain the most from all of this and to give the most? It's Muslim women.
Excellent. Sharif, you are at the core of a very, very influential segment. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Sure. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm Sharif Bana, the CEO and co-founder of a company called Awakening Worldwide. We initially started off as a publishing house 15 years ago. Very soon realized that the global ummah doesn't read. So in a few years, we shifted quite by accident to the space of culture, art and music. And we set up a record label called Awakening Records. In 2003, we identified and launched our first Muslim artist by the name of Sami Yusuf. And we've been continuing to launch the careers of artists since then. What is quite noteworthy, and I'd like to build on what Shahid was initially saying in his introduction, was that when we, in 2003, launched this record label, wanted to enter into this space of music, culture, albeit with values which are from our faith, and generic human values. And this is why the tagline we have is faith-inspired and value-driven content. Our vision was pretty much the UK, Europe, and at best the Western Muslim space. That was our vision. Never for a moment did we think that we would be operating in Sudan, Dubai, Azerbaijan, South Africa, China, now Russia, moving on to India. And this is, I think, exactly where Shahid is absolutely right in identifying that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this growth was only beginning. And in my opinion, it's still in its infancy. We now have what we term as the urban Muslim, or I would say Muslims who are technologically or digitally connected, especially in the context of music. You don't necessarily need to be urban. You go to the villages of Bosnia, villages of Bangladesh, you will find licensed content from Awakening being played on mobile handsets, which are being given out by Grameen Telephone for about $5-7. So accessibility in terms of audiences, wherever they may be, to access our content has hugely changed the way we do business and changed the way we look at our own audiences. And in this sort of travel or journey of a decade, just over a decade, I guess we've been successful in getting some things right, and we're still facing challenges. And what I'm actually more excited about is discussing the challenges rather than narrating the successes. However, I would say that without the advent of social media, Facebook, YouTube, Google, I think our business proposition, our penetration into global markets would be severely hindered. Especially with the rise of iTunes. You see, our market is a global market. Our audience is a global Muslim audience, not necessarily in Muslim majority countries. So the 400,000 Muslims who live in Vienna are also our audience as much as the millions of Muslims who are living in Egypt. Accessing these audiences, understanding their behavior, their likes, their concern as to what they want and how we shape that is an ongoing challenge we face on a day-to-day basis. We believe the product of what we term as Islamic culture or Islamic music of what we've developed, it's something which is a hybrid, or something that sits between the offering of a secular, mainstream, pop culture-driven content and something which is conservative, traditional, not necessarily capturing the imagination of the vast majority of our audience, which, according to our YouTube demographics, are between the ages of 18 and 27. And by the way, YouTube last month, I think, developed an online software to track content online, your own content. So for example, they've only opened this up for music companies, for artists. So you can type in the name of an artist on YouTube, youtube.com Music Insights, and it will tell you the number of views that artist has across all its content professionally produced by the company, as well as, what is more important, user-uploaded content. So that's content that our audience will take. So we might do let's say with Sami, we produced a video in 4 countries called Hasbi Rabbi. We spent money producing this video, putting it on YouTube. Our fans and our audience and customers thought otherwise. They would take the audio of that song and then put the visuals of whatever they would like. So the YouTube software now tracks those uploads which are also user-generated. Not only that, it also tracks not just a song, but the melody. So it could be someone has taken the melody, but then has decided to do their own wedding song. But they're using the melody that we initially brought out to the world. So in this sort of very sophisticated algorithm, we can actually pinpoint the number of views, the place, the diversity of audiences, just out of curiosity, just to gauge your level of knowledge in terms of YouTube and Google. How many views do you think? One of our artists is a Swedish-Lebanese artist by the name of Mahir Zain. From September 2014 to September 2015, if you were to put his name into YouTube Music Insights, how many views do you think his videos, or Awakening produced videos, or user-uploaded content, both together have generated? Any guesses? 50 million, that's quite generous, but be more generous. You're all generous people. Wow. I mean, it was shocking for us because we can only count, prior to this software, we could only count the views that we were generating. Through our own music videos, you can just tally up the views. What we couldn't count was user engagement. How was our audience engaging with that content on their own terms, not on our term? Any other 300, a bit more generous. We're in the Gulf here, so. It's 1.2 billion. Now, 1.2 billion views, you're shocked, we're shocked. What's quite interesting for us is to note that 60% of that 1.2 billion is user-uploaded content, not us. So ours would account for what? Around 400 million or so of that. And over, or more than that, but the vast majority or a significant majority was how the audience wished to engage with our content. And it's diverse. You look at the top 10 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, UK, America, France, Sudan, Russia is in the top 15, not the top 10. For us, we've never stepped foot in some of these countries, yet our content is penetrating these audiences. And it's some of these insights perhaps we can share later on during the session. I'll hand over to
Wonderful.
Shahid.
Amira, you've been interacting with this market through multiple different companies and multiple different initiatives. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your work, what connects you to this market.
Sure. For starters, I'm an Egyptian American, so I kind of lived in both parts of the world and understand both cultures. But more importantly, I've been working in one form or another in the digital space for almost 9 years now, which is an eternity, really, when you think about the digital space. Right now, I'm with Facebook. I oversee brand advertising, so I work with major multinationals on how they leverage the Facebook and Instagram platforms to grow their businesses. The interesting thing about Facebook and Instagram, other than the fact that they're the most pervasive platforms in the world, really, as for starters, but also in this part of the world, and I by no means am saying that this part of the world is wholly representative of the Islamic world, but it's definitely indicative of a lot of the behavior. The interesting about it is that I think there's a quality related to being who you are or understanding who you're dealing with, which is part and parcel of what Facebook is all about. So it is basically based on your real identity. And when you know, given the jungle out there, sort of in the online world, when you know who you are, when others know exactly who you are, and when you know that they know who you are, your behavior becomes driven toward creating this online persona that is worthy of who you believe you want to be. So you kind of hopefully live up to your best self, if you will. And then it becomes, and this is something that we're seeing kind of evolve back to the point about millennials over time as new generations sort of start getting into or embracing their various forms of social interactions or connections and so on. They are less and less weary of issues around privacy. They are more and more out there in terms of representing themselves. And they're certainly very cognizant of how they want to be portrayed. And they're not at all afraid of putting very clearly out there to whoever is watching or listening, be it advertisers or be it governments or be it whomever, in a very clear way what they're thinking, what they want. We've seen it very clearly demonstrated in the Arab Spring. We've seen it very clearly demonstrated in how they choose to interact with commercial messaging. We've seen it very clearly demonstrated in how connected they are, both on a personal level as well as on a social level. A very small sort of example I like to give is I have but a tiny fraction of the number of Facebook friends that my teenage son has, for example. And Facebook is one of a couple of platforms, be it Instagram or others that he's on. So they feel very comfortable with interacting, sometimes even in different ways, based on their real identities. Now, why am I bringing this whole concept of real identity out there? I actually think it is an extremely important one that gels very well with an Islamic identity, because one of the basics of operating as a Muslim is to be open and true and clear in what you do, and the internet or the online world should not be any exception to that. So as you connect and as you start interacting with either other people or a community or even commercially with brands, you will take with you those values if you had them in the first place. If you didn't have them, that's a different story. And if you look at things from the other side of the table, whoever is trying to reach you will have to be very cognizant of that and will have to interact with you based on those values as well. So sort of from a big picture perspective, we are about connecting people because we believe when we do, on all levels, be it on a personal level or a commercial level or even a common good or from a government perspective, those bridges that we create actually help make things better for all involved if you are observing those values in the first place that you would have observed in the real world, but you're just bringing with you to this new realm.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I have tons of questions for all of you. Also, if those of you in the audience, if you have questions, we're definitely going to have a question and answer session toward the end of the period. But I want to throw out one question to all of you first, and then I'm going to give you individual questions. Because I'm trying to get a sense of this market that we're talking about, I want each of you to talk to me a little bit about what this market is saying to you, either as a cultural creator or as someone who observes, and more importantly, what is it you are trying to say back to them? Because as I've mentioned, you're also in that role of helping to kind of shape that market and mold that market while it's still a little malleable. So Amani, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think that it goes really hand in hand with what Amira is saying about shaping an identity, using social media in that way. Absolutely translates into consumerism as well. And I think that for our audience at Muslim Girl, of Muslim women, I think that that's a huge part of what's going on right now. When we are carving out a space for ourselves in the marketplace like that, especially when we're using things like modest fashion as a way to do so, we really are pushing back against global expectations of who we are, what we stand for, and proclaiming that this is who we are, especially when it comes to something as contentious as fashion, right? People don't really expect that of Muslim women. They think that it's just, as if we don't wear like anything underneath the black abayas and black scarves, I think that it's extremely important. It has a huge part to do with this reclamation of narratives in the post-9/11 era. And I think that the message that we want to give back by having this platform and by allowing this gateway into this audience is that those opinions and voices and tastes do not need to be censored or molded into those expectations. We're creating our own media in order to create an independent platform where we don't have to cater to a certain image or be malleable into a specific agenda that's already existing on a global scale. And I think that we're seeing a lot of change in that way. Okay. Absolutely.
Quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
Do you see yourself as a platform where people are navigating the discovery of their identity on their own, or do you actually have a identity that you are projecting out there as kind of, here's an identity that we think encompasses all of you that we're helping to shape? Like, which one is it, or is it a little bit of both?
I think that it's not mutually exclusive.
Okay.
The identity that we are projecting to everyone is that they are entitled to their own identity and their own autonomy in deciding what that identity is. But also, I think that we do offer a safe space where a lot of young women are trying to navigate that identity right now, especially ones that have been basically told all their lives as they were growing up, since they were girls, what it means to be a Muslim. And when they come on our website and they see all these other Muslim women really taking charge of their identities and how they interact with the world, it gives them a lot of room to grow and understand their own place in the world and shape their own identity as well.
So you're allowing some of that creative tension to happen.
Absolutely.
Okay, Sharif, I take that question over to you. Your audience is asking stuff of you, and you're giving stuff. So what is it when you look, for example, when you're looking for culture creators? What is it you're looking for in them that you think is going to be receptive to that audience, and what is your audience asking of you through whatever channels that they communicate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually agree that it is an issue of identity. Our work, I see in Awakening as an intersection between faith, identity, technology, and culture. And that's the kind of spaces that we're navigating. And in that question of identity, I mean, as I mentioned, we started off by trying to give some substance to what we would term as a Western Muslim culture. I grew up in the UK. I've lived in the UK, was schooled in the UK, and we all went through this journey of trying to harmonize our multiple identities as Muslims, as British, as our own heritages that we may have of our forefathers. So for us, it was giving substance to the meaning of Western Muslim culture. But very soon we realized this isn't something limited to Western Muslims. This also has a global appeal or a global vacuum. And in essence, if we're to speak about it in one word, I would say it's about really navigating faith identities in a postmodern era. Or the work that we're attempting to do is, let's say, modernity with a religious flavor. That's in essence what's happening. In terms of what the audience wants, I would say they want to feel comfortable with dual identities of being seen as a Muslim, but at the same time in the public space, being accepted, we had a professor from the States who did a short, interesting piece of research on awakening, and he compared the awakening's kind of contribution to Motown Records and what Motown Records did for repositioning the image of a black person in America. That it's repositioning the image of a Muslim. Our work in that sense goes to repositioning the Muslim in the public space. I would say that although it is a two-way conversation, we are also trying to guide our, I wouldn't say guide, we're also trying to learn at the same time, and hopefully our learnings are also taken up by our audiences. That's what I would say, because we're on a journey ourselves.
You can't deny that you have a point of view, right? That informs all the work that you do.
Absolutely, we do have a point of view, but I don't think our point of view is engraved in stone and written in a way that we can sort of, go out across global audiences and gain conformity to this point of view. I think we have a basic framework of what we define faith, identity, the role of culture, technology to be, and awakening is simply an experiment to see where that is heading.
And the market will tell you whether you're right or wrong.
The market, yeah. I mean, depending on how you're defining right or wrong, is it by sales? Is it by? Sometimes we are hugely convinced of our ideals, but the market might not be necessarily receptive of that. That doesn't necessarily mean we would forsake our forsake our own sort of way or worldview of looking at. But we have to, and we do. I mean, to tell you the truth, we were in a presentation earlier about an app which the creator was describing as scary and frightening. Actually, what we have at the moment, I mean, thanks again to Facebook, is that across our social media pages, we have access to around 35 million likes or so, 35 million fans. Now, sometimes, we come back home and I think, you know what, 35 million likes, that's like 5 countries. Jordan has like, 5 million, 6 million, Dubai, Qatar, out of a few of those, I mean, we're essentially managing countries. The population of countries is not something small. What do we do with this? What are they, where are they heading? What do they want from us? What works with them? And sometimes we do our own experimentation, realizing very much that what we may think we want for them, our audience, is not necessarily what they would want. For example, now and then we would experiment with an inspirational quote on one of our Facebook pages. Let's say Maher Zain's Facebook page has 25 million. He's actually the most famous Muslim on Facebook, just to let you know. So, we would put a quote from, let's say, Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, an inspirational quote. You will get what? 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 likes at best. Now, I know for some of you that's quite good as well. For us, that's quite poor. But you have a picture of Maher in Beirut drinking watermelon. That has like 350,000 likes. Now it's like, look, the market or the audience might like our artists being personal and having watermelon, but that's fine. But where is that all heading? It's in that kind of culture, and it's not just specific to Muslims. This is the global online consumption, consumer-driven world that we live out there, based on which we're getting our views, so I can't complain too much. But sometimes, I go back thinking, I mean, what is it? What exactly are we reaching out to? You know, a few years ago when Gangnam Style, you know, surpassed all records by reaching over 1 billion views. I mean, what is it? I mean, it's like, you know, a culture of nothingness, a culture of, you know, they say in Arabic, nas fadiyin. Yani, they don't have anything better to do, but I'm not complaining because we also need them, but we're on a journey together.
It's energy to harness. Amira, you've also been, you know, observing this very closely and from multiple angles, and not just Muslim audiences, but general audiences as well. Building off what Sharif was saying, how much of what Muslim audiences are doing is specific to them being a Muslim audience, and how much of it is simply that they're part of this global generation of people who are online from any background? What part of it is unique that you see?
Well, I think there's definitely a foundation of a millennial anywhere you meet them, or you know, they're going to have the same inclinations, sometimes interests or whatever, and then there's this layer of culture and religion and lifestyle and so on. I think that there are elements related to culture that definitely shape your behavior, you know, online in general. So, for example, you hear statistics about engagement on certain platforms being through the roof in this part of the world. I was in a market visit in Saudi Arabia recently. We're actually launching tonight ads on Instagram officially. I was at a market visit in Saudi Arabia about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and we were sitting in a focus group environment, and the ladies that we were with were talking about buying and selling stuff on Instagram based on ads, and I'm like, we don't sell ads on Instagram. What are you talking about? And it turns out that there's this whole, not only are there ads and stores, there's also a whole distribution system that is structured solely to deliver e-commerce from the ads on Instagram because it works for these ladies. So-and-so's driver is moonlighting to deliver, you know, whatever it is, and it's become this, you know,
I found it's disproportionate in this part of the world, actually.
Thriving,
as well,
yes,
from
exactly.
What I understand.
And part of it is because a lot of the youth or young people in this part of the world actually see those platforms as being their window to the world, if you will, world locally, world internationally, and so on. But when we talk about, you know, I found myself staring earlier at the logo, Global Islamic Economy Summit, and everybody starts to think, when you say Islamic economy, they start thinking about Muslim countries as being a market. I actually think it's a two-way street. So when you think about the youth in this part of the world suddenly having access to you know, app development capabilities or markets all over the world that they could sell their ideas and sell, be it content or be it software or be it even, you know, modest dress or whatever it is, their aptitude and their ability to leverage those platforms in a very advanced way, which has actually proven itself, could be a huge, huge advantage for them to crack new markets, for them to actually expand the economy based on their values, but leveraging audiences elsewhere around the world.
This is true, and this is actually a really good point that I actually want to stress for people. This isn't just a market that consumes, it's a market that creates. And if you look, for example, at the most popular YouTube stars in America, or actually just in general, you'll find quite a few Muslims who are YouTube stars. Their markets aren't specifically Muslim, their markets are general, but they don't hide their identity. And so, as such, they're able to project out to millions. I'm thinking people like FusiTube and other people like that. These are people that are able to project out to audiences who never would have interacted with a Muslim. And these are people now who are being entertained by Muslim, who see them in a human light, whose perceptions are completely shattered because this mainstream channel is talking to them.
I'll give you a very simple example. We launched video advertising on Facebook back in December. Back then, we had 500 million views a day. Today, we're very close to touching 5 billion views a day. A short 9 months later. This part of the world, actually Muslim countries in general, index at 2 times the consumption of video. And by the way, there is a correlation also in terms of video uploads and so on. So it's engagement overall. So I think there's a huge opportunity, back to your original question, to shape that, attraction and skill set that has developed to online platforms into more of a productive force, if you will. So we work with various entities, for example, on a pro bono basis to propagate coding education to help young men and women learn exactly how to leverage back-end software as well as marketing tools on our platforms to build their own e-commerce businesses and so on. So it really needs to be, it's great that they have the aptitude and the intent and the ability to leverage these global channels connecting people globally, but it is also about what's in it for me, how can I develop the skill sets to actually become productive and benefit this global economy.
Excellent. As a matter of fact, Finnis Labs, the incubator that I run, we've actually created a group of Hollywood content creators, directors, producers, stars, that are willing to train Muslim storytellers around the world so they could even more accelerate their narratives out there. And so we're trying to actually empower them in this specific medium. I'm going to ask you one quick question, and then I'm going to turn it over. I can't believe the hour is almost up. And then I'll be turning it over. So anyone who has questions, there are people with microphones. I will be calling you, and then someone with the microphone will come to you. But I'm going to start off with one question. And it's a little bit of a difficult question for me to ask because we are all guilty of this, which is we are all from the West. And we are disproportionately interacting with this market. Do you feel that we are in some ways imposing our norms and our culture and our ideas onto this global market, or is that global market choosing the mediums that we're responding to? What do you think? Especially for the content creators here.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, that's an issue that we consider every day on Muslim Girl because it is overwhelmingly a Western narrative that we are propagating. The thing is that when we cultivate our voice in the West, it translates really well into other parts of the world as well. You know, it makes people start listening. Like, for example, the booming modest fashion industry, right? DKNY was among one of the first brands to create a fashion line solely tailored for Ramadan, for Muslim women. But where did they debut that line? They only debuted it in Dubai, in the UAE. And Americans and people in the West, they had no access to buying those clothes unless they traveled here to get it. But if it wasn't for that presence in the West and getting people to start listening to us, we wouldn't have had that happen. And you know, DKNY and other brands as well can have their own reasons why they cater to the Middle East for those designers, but it's undeniable that there's a connection there. Furthermore, one thing that is a tenet of the work that we do at MuslimGirl.net is that we believe by cultivating a greater voice and presence for Muslim women in the West, we're able to have an influence over policies and attitudes that impact Muslim countries and countries in other parts of the world, right? Because a lot of those post-9/11 attitudes that we were discussing, they rest on the shoulders of women, especially veiled Muslim women. You know, it's Western countries saying that Muslim women are silenced and docile and oppressed and voiceless. So when we push back and say, no, you know, we are our own individuals, we have our own voice, and this is what Islam is, and this is what Muslim women stand for, we're able to shift that narrative completely. And by doing so, we're able to impact the attitudes of the markets here, the companies here, and the policies that are being formulated here that directly impact Muslim women and Muslim men in Muslim countries overseas. So there's a connection. Really, you can't disconnect it.
Okay. And anyone else? Sharif?
Yeah, it's an interesting question you ask. And reflecting, I think there's different ways of answering that question at different levels. I think when you, I mean, as a content creator, whether what I am creating is Eastern or Western. It would be a product of my own kind of experience as an individual, us as a collective, as a company, and imposing that. I mean, I think imposing is quite a heavy word in that sense. I would say we are exposing that to perhaps other areas and other audiences who otherwise would not have been exposed to this. So I would agree on that. And thinking back, I do actually think that sometimes, given the socio-economic realities, that's something that works in the West, even if it's in a faith-based driven framework, it somehow also can capture the imagination of the East. And we actually we did consciously play on that, if that's the question you ask. For example, one of our artists in the Arab media, he could perfectly, he could speak Arabic perfectly well, but we made sure he doesn't speak Arabic, because he would be respected more as a Western Muslim artist rather than somewhere around the corner from Maadi or from Taba or from whatever place in the Arab world. So there is that element of using let's say, our own backgrounds, our own experiences, and exposing that, I guess, across different markets.
But can that kind of undermine the progress? Instead of like pushing our own?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, I'm quite comfortable. So when you say Western values, well, what does Western values mean? I mean, what am I taking from that I'm exposing or imposing? So I think it goes to a deeper discussion, and which I think is the crux of anything that we do as content creators, as to what is Islamic. So when we say an Islamic economy or an Islamic fashion or Islamic music, the discussion to have is, what is Islamic about any of this? Is it just faith validation, that you need a Sharia council that sort of validates this? Or is it something deeper? I mean, our understanding of Islamic can incorporate values which may stem from Western heritage.
Yeah. I do want to point out, you mentioned Gangnam Style before, and I think that there's an important lesson in that, a song in Korean became the world's most popular YouTube video. So this is not just a west to east thing. It can also be an east to west thing. It just depends on the empowerment of the content creator around the world. Amra, if you want to add something, and then we're going to go ahead and go to questions.
I mean, just very briefly. So for us, we're a platform. We're really, and I know this is the wrong word to use in an Islamic conference, but we're really content agnostic, right? So it is really about how do you best leverage the platform. But I think there's a very important lesson also to teach youth in this part of the world, and that is he or she who manages to master the tools and to innovate gets to write the story and propagate whatever values and language and whatever it is that you want to propagate. So let that be the incentive for us to actually start doing these things.
Sounds good. Okay, we're going to take it to questions. We have 10 minutes. I'd like to fill it with as many questions as possible. Why don't we start with you, Mohammed?
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, my question was to the content producers. We say global urban Muslim a lot, and it seems like we're kind of paintbrushing this broad, huge audience. How much customization or differentiation should content producers do according to cultures, countries, languages, and us consciously trying to push for that as well as part of capturing the market?
Interesting question. The content producers.
Sure. I think that for us, honestly, it's very natural in that our content is being produced by the people that have the most access to this type of technology, right? So it's the people that are already engaged, that are already on social media, that have internet access. We aren't necessarily creating content tailored to them specifically. We are looking at the types of people that are engaging with us as a platform, that are submitting their own narratives to us, and we are simply reflecting them. So it's really just made up of the people that interact with us directly right off the bat.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, you in the blue hijab.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Salam.
And I want to ask you, you said we should control the content before the big boys get it. Who are the big boys?
The man.
Yeah, well, I'll start. Why don't you read it?
Go ahead.
So I think I can speak for a lot of the folks here. There are a lot of mainstream entities that do not understand or appreciate the value of this market and are scared away by some fairly superficial reasons. I mean, even when you actually give them the numbers, they're still very reluctant. I know, having tried to court advertisers for 15 years for Zabia.com, there's some mental block. But money is a great solvent of racism. And when the figure gets big enough, that feeling will go away. And when that goes away, you have people with a lot of deep pockets, whether it's in the halal food industry or in the content creation industry or the fashion industry, that will see that as a prize and will be able to simply buy their way into it and bulldoze. We're all still, small compared to some of the bigger entities. But I'd like, go ahead and you can talk, because I was actually going to ask you about, the big industries that are catering to women and how they are keeping an eye on what you're doing. And not only that, and then also with you, like, what happens when the big record labels, see what you're doing and they're like, hey, wait a second, we want some of that action. They try to poach your content.
Yeah.
Or is that something you're worried about?
Yes and no. I think the answer is also linked to the first question that Mohammed mentioned, to do with the demographics and the audiences that we're dealing with. In our own experience, and we're dealing with the global Muslim audience, whether they're in Muslim majority countries or otherwise. So when we speak about mainstream, a lot of our mainstream engagement is in the Muslim majority countries where, let's say, the big labels operate. Let's take Indonesia as an example. Indonesia, back in 2007 or 8, when Sami Yusuf was at his peak, we tried to go to Indonesia, knock on a few doors, Warner, Universal, Sony Music. We wouldn't even get the courtesy of a reply. And thus, when we sort of realized this is a dead market, labels aren't interested, we probably won't penetrate these markets as we have in other regions. And hence, when we launched Maher Zain, we've completely neglected Southeast Asia. 2 years after launching Maher Zain, 30 to 40% of our market, of our audience, of our revenue stream was from that part of the region. And what did you have? You had the big boys knocking on our doors. So you had the CEOs of Warner, Universal, Sony in Indonesia wanting to take us out for dinner. We'd go out, we'd take on every dinner invitation. Now, they got it. What they got was, look, there is this combination of algorithm where Awakening have come up with this faith-inspired music that is now captivating a critical number of Indonesians. So number does matter. And when number matters, then I think the negotiations are slightly more at our own advantage as content creators.
Well, you're in a position of strength now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we said, we put them on a bidding war for about 6 months and went with who gave us the best dinner. So,
Sounds good.
No, it's true.
We have probably time for one, maybe two more questions. Why don't we go ahead and go with you, and then if we have time, we'll go with you.
I guess my question is more related to your internal operations. How, and I think Shahid, you touched upon it briefly when you talked about engaging Hollywood writers. So how easy or difficult do you find to engage or to collaborate with non-Muslims to cater to the Islamic economy as such? So.
Really quickly, it's increasingly easier. It's odd because you see all this hostility online towards Muslims, but I've found time and time again, not just with the narratives, with working with Hollywood, people willingly giving free time, wanting to empower Muslim storytellers, but also, for example, in the halal space with Zabia.com, right? Now you're having mainstream chains and whatnot going all in on halal and just wanting to go ahead and cater it because they've done the calculations in their head. I will gain more customers than I will lose by doing this, and that enables collaboration.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think that the success that MuslimGirl.net has been experiencing in that way has been unprecedented for us in the media space, for Muslim Americans especially, and it goes right into what you were saying about the big dogs and having them come to you. It's almost like when you build it, they will come. So for us, one of the biggest excuses for Muslim women's voices being neglected in the media is that, oh, well, who do we talk to? You know, there aren't any Muslim women out there like putting their opinions out there. But with us being present, there's no excuse, right? So when they cover Muslim women's issues, then now they have a resource. When we start getting republication requests from Fortune magazine or a column in Forbes, or we get written about in Teen Vogue, it becomes like a snowball. So it increases people's awareness of our existence, and in that way increases more people's willingness to reach out to us as well. It's really all about the accessibility and just putting your name out there and making people know, be aware of your existence.
We work with many non-Muslims that are willing to be a part of this industry, not just because of the money part, but because they actually believe in a lot of these values. They actually want to see a strong, healthy Muslim market. They feel it's in everyone's interest.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick on your point about employee, our founding art director from the very day Awakening was incepted, for about a decade or so, was a non-Muslim of Welsh origin. Why he wanted to work with us? Simply because of the values that we had. I mean, he was a superb designer, motion graphic artist. I mean, he was an all-rounded talent. He felt that if I ended up in a multinational company working for Apple or IBM, you know, I'd be paid a very good salary, but they'd be making millions of that. I'd rather come to a company like Awakening, where they might not be earning as much as, you know, Apple, but I might not be earning as much, but I feel comfortable with those kind of values and ethics of engagement. Many of our directors, even our musicians, you know, we also have an event management division. We tour the world, and you know, many of our musicians are, you know, non-Muslims, you know, going into Muslim audiences and spaces. Although once we did have an issue with one of our musicians from Holland. You know, we're trying to tell him, look, you're in, I think it was an event in Jeddah. We said, look, don't wear the cross, right? We're all fine, you know, America is fine, Australia is fine, you know, religious freedom, you do whatever you want. We will run into a few problems in Jeddah, and, you know, apart from these small incidents, it's been a wonderful journey.
Okay. Amir, if you want to say anything, otherwise we're gonna have to wrap it because we are running right into the end.
Fine.
Okay, actually, if you have a very quick question, the gentleman here. Yeah, but this will be the last.
One quick comment and a question. I think we are looking at this the wrong way round. We tend to view culture from the perspective of its American culture, Islamic culture, or British culture, or maybe a Christian culture. Are we not looking at this that it is an identity culture? So rather than identity, faith, culture, and technology, it's not a culture of nothingness if 1 billion people are watching Gangnam Style. It's a culture of identity. So the question is, are we not creating, in a world that it is global and connected, creating segregation through Islamic identity rather than a global, unified, integrated identity?
Question. I like to think of it as our contribution to the world because I don't like drawing lines around what we're doing. I love the fact that non-Muslims use Zabia.com to explore our food and get to learn of us through our food, and I'm sure that's the case with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I was alluding to earlier. It depends on how you're defining Islamic. Is it in a theological sense or simply in a cultural identity sense? I mean, for us, Islamic here is referring to the essence of values which we can share with others, which connects us with others, whether that be of togetherness, of coexistence, of our languages and colors. It's not about the erosion of our identities, because a call towards a global identity that is monolithic, I think, you know, can lead to other unfortunate consequences. It's about preserving our own tradition, our own identities, but then being open enough to converse and to engage with others. This is why one of the main challenges that I feel, and I'll conclude with this, of any Islamic product is that we can be, is what I term as the specificity of source or motivation. You know, why are we doing this? That could be religious, could be cultural, could be whatever the case may be. But how do we make it universally appeal? So how do we take something that is rooted in our tradition, but then open to everyone and everyone? And regardless of faith, culture, and background. And that's the real challenge of anything that is rooted within a faith-based framework that wants to connect with global communities.
Yeah, and I want to push back really quick as well, is that there is a global identity, and it's overwhelmingly Western. I mean, we're reflecting a power play right now, and by accentuating marketplaces that really put forward other identities, like the Muslim one, All it is creating a level playing field. Like right now, what's happening is we're trying to get a more Muslim presence on in the global community. If you want to erase that by saying, oh, let's make it all one identity, a global one, undeniably, it's going to be a Western one. That's how it's going to happen. That's what it is right now.
Okay. Well, it looks like we just scratched the surface of this issue. I'm sure we're going to have continuing conversations. I encourage you to contact any of the folks up here on this panel and think about this issue yourself, so when we come here maybe next year, we can take it all to another level. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this, and thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.